Hello, fifth graders. Welcome to our next math lesson. Today we're looking at lesson 16-2, which is entitled Classifying Quadrilaterals. And our lesson for today is going to start on page 858. Now, in our last lesson, we talked about how to classify triangles, which were three-sided figures with three angles. Today, we're going to talk about classifying quadrilaterals. Now, quadrilaterals are a little different than triangles because the word quad right here means four. So all the things that we're going to be talking about today are four-sided figures. And with four-sided figures, there are a number of different four-sided figures. We're going to try to talk about a few of them today, and you're going to notice that after we define each one of them, you're going to notice that some of the four-sided figures can actually have more than one name to them. And I mentioned up here at the top, says, in order to classify quadrilaterals, we need to define each one. After defining them, you're going to notice that a lot of four-sided shapes actually have multiple names. Now, we're going to start off with probably the two most famous, popular, the ones that you think of the most. Whenever you think of a four-sided figure, I'm going to guess that the majority of you, I know I do at least, think about either a square or a rectangle. And yes, both of these are four-sided figures. But you should notice that both of them there are some similarities to them, but there are also some things that are different. Now, in your book today, if there's one criticism that I'll have about the EnVision Math is they don't really go into depth as to the definition of some of these. They give kind of a blanket definition. So on this video, I'm going to give a little bit more of a defined definition for some of these. And by doing so, it's going to help us better understand exactly what shapes we are talking about. So for example, I'm going to start with this one right here. This right here, this four-sided figure, this is a square. Now, when you think of a square, obviously you think of four sides, and there are some characteristics about a square. First of all four sides are going to be this exact same length. So in order for you to have a square, you do need to have all four sides being the same length. So like if this was 3 feet, then all of these would be 3 feet. So that's the first definition of a square, is you have four sides that have all four sides of the same measurement. Then when you also look at their angles, they're going to be made up of four right angles. So this is a right angle right here, this is a right angle here, here, and here. So far I have four sides that have the same length, and I have four right angles. There's one more characteristic to a square that I want you to pay attention to, and it's this last one right here. It says a square is going to have two sets of parallel sides. Now, what does that mean? Well, parallel means two lines that run along the same line. So, for example, this side right here is parallel to that side right there. So this is one set of parallel sides, okay? You'll also notice that up here, these two are also parallel as well. This would be the second set of parallel sides. So when I say there are two sets of parallel sides, I'm saying this is one of them right here, one set, and here's another one. Your four-sided figure needs to have all three of these in order for it to be a square, okay? Now we're going to jump over here to a rectangle, and you notice that a rectangle has some very similar definitions as a square. For example, a rectangle is going to have four right angles. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, a square has four right angles. A rectangle also needs to have four right angles. Okay? You're also going to notice that a rectangle is going to have two sets of parallel sides. So again, this side here is parallel to that one, so that's one set. This side right here is parallel to this side, so that's two sets. If there's one difference between them is in a rectangle, you don't have all four sides the same length. But that's okay. You don't have to have the four sides being the same length. So whenever you're defining a rectangle, if it has these two characteristics, if it has four right angles and it has two sets of parallel sides, then you have a rectangle, okay? So here are our definitions of squares and rectangles. We're going to come back to those in just a little bit. There are some other four-sided figures I wanted to draw your attention to. Another one you might be aware of is a parallelogram, and it kind of has this, it kind of looks like a rectangle that's kind of slanted, And if you look at the definition of a parallelogram, it just has one definition. In order for it to be a parallelogram, you need to have two sets of parallel sides. Well, this side here is parallel to this side, so that's one set. This side here is parallel to this side right here, so it does have two parallel sides, two sets of parallel sides. You'll notice that they do not have right angles. As a matter of fact, this one's acute, and this one's acute, and that one's obtuse, and this one's obtuse. So it has two acute and two obtuse. But that doesn't necessarily matter in this particular lesson for today. Just the fact that a parallelogram's definition is it needs to have two sets of parallel sides. If it does, then it's called a parallelogram. Over here is another one. It's called a rhombus. And maybe you have or have not heard of this term before. A rhombus has two distinct characteristics. Number one, you need to have four side lengths that are the same length, which means this side right here is going to be the same as this one, this one, this one. So all four of these side lengths are the exact same measurement. So if this was, let's say, 4 inches, that means every single one of these, this one, this one, this one, these are all going to be 4 inches. And also you notice it has two sets of parallel sides because this side is parallel to that side and this side is parallel to that side. Okay, so by definition, if any figure has 4 equal side lengths and has two sets of parallel sides, then it's going to be called a rhombus. Okay. The other two that are probably the less familiar that we use a lot of, one of them is called a trapezoid. And this trapezoid looks a little bit different than the other ones. And if you look at the definition, there's really only one part about a trapezoid. It's going to have one set of parallel sides, not two like this parallelogram or this rhombus would have. It's just going to have one set. And if you look at this figure up here, it's obviously a four-sided figure. This side is parallel to this side. Now, you'll notice that these two are not the same length, and that's okay. They don't have to be the same length. They just have to be parallel to each other. So this would be an example of a trapezoid. Now, what I did over here is trapezoids don't just always look like this, though. Trapezoids can take a couple of different shapes. For example, if you take this right here, this side right here is parallel to this side. This side is not parallel to that side, so it only has one set of parallel sides. So this would also be a trapezoid. If you're looking at the map of the United States, this one kind of looks like the state of Nevada, has that trapezoid look to it. There's one more that we're going to talk about today, and it's an actual quadrilateral. What exactly is a quadrilateral? A quadrilateral just means it has 4 sides. That's it. That means none of the sides are parallel, because if you take a look at this one and this one, those are definitely not parallel. This one and this one's not parallel. So there's no sides that are parallel, doesn't have any right angles to them. So if it's a 4-sided figure, we're going to call it a quadrilateral. So now those are the 6 terms we're going to talk about today, 5th graders. And what we're going to do today is we're going to be shown a number of different shapes. And what you're going to have to do is you are going to have to name that shape in as many ways as possible. So we're going to do that on this page here. And what I did on this page, this might not be a bad page to have open while you're doing this math assignment today. Because what I did is I wrote all the definitions that were on this slide previously, but I made them a lot smaller so they're all on one particular area. Okay? So the main idea for today is we're going to use as many names as possible to identify these particular shapes. Okay? Use as many names as possible to identify the shapes. And then we're going to say which one of those shapes is the most specific name that we know. Which one's going to be the most specific name? Okay. So let's start with this shape right here. Okay. So if we take this one step at a time, we're going to look at each one of these and say, which one is it? Let's start with a square. Does this have 4 sides that have the same length? Yep. These look like it has 4 sides that are the same length. But does this have 4 right angles? Do those look like 4 right angles to you? I'm hoping you're answering no, because they are not. So because this does not have 4 right angles, this is not going to be a square. Okay, let's go look at a rectangle. Does it have 4 right angles? Well, we already established it doesn't. So since it doesn't have 4 right angles, that means it is not going to be a rectangle either. Let's look at a rhombus. Okay, does it have 4 equal side lengths? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, it's got that. Check. Does it have 2 sets of parallel sides? This is parallel to that. This one's parallel to that. So this would be A rhombus. So one of the things I'm going to put down here, I'm going to put RH for rhombus right now. I'm not going to spell it out because it's hard for me to write this on this computer. But right now I know so far that that's a rhombus. How about, is it a parallelogram? Does it fit the definition of a parallelogram? Well, does it have two sets of parallel sides? Well, this set is that these two are parallel, so that's one set. These two are also parallel, so yeah, I would say this is also a parallelogram. So I'm going to put a P here for parallel. So far I've defined this as a rhombus and also a parallelogram. Let's look at it. Is it a trapezoid? Does it have one set of parallel sides? Well, some might say, yes, it does, but remember, it only can have one set. It can't have two. Since this one has two sets of parallel sides, it would not fall underneath the trapezoid category. Trapezoids only have one set, okay? What about a quadrilateral? Is it a quadrilateral? Well, is it a four-sided figure? Does it have four sides to it? Yes, it does. So we're going to call this a quadrilateral. So what I've done now is I've named this figure right here as many ways as I could. It's a rhombus, it's a parallelogram, and it's a quadrilateral. Now what I have to do is I have to tell which one of those names is the most specific. And yes, quadrilateral, that's true. And yes, it is a parallelogram. But I think rhombus is the most specific because it names more than one quality to it. Like the quadrilateral has one quality, that's it. Parallelogram just has one quality, that's it. Rhombus, there's two qualities. So I would say this is a good example of a rhombus. So what I would do on my sheet of paper is I would circle the rhombus and just say, this one here is the one that most specifically describes that particular shape. Okay, let's look at our next shape here. Okay, so let's take a look and let's go one at a time. Square, does it fit the definition of a square? Does it have four side lengths that are equal? I don't think so because I think this side here is longer than this side, so I would say this is not a square. Let's take a look at a rectangle. Does it have four right angles? 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like those angles are right angles, so that's okay. Does it have two sets of parallel sides? Well, those two are parallel. Those two are parallel. Yes, it does. So I would say that this is a rectangle. So I'm going to put an RE for rectangle. Okay. Let's look at a rhombus. Does it have four equal sides? Well, I think we've already established that it does not have four equal sides. So since it doesn't have four equal sides, it's not a rhombus. How about a parallelogram? Does it have two sets of parallel sides? Well, these two are parallel, so that's one set. These two are parallel, so that's a second set. So yes, it does. So I'm going to put a comma here. I'm going to put a letter P for it is also a parallelogram. How about this one? Is it a trapezoid? Does it have only one set of parallel sides? Nope, it's got two. And since it's got two, it cannot be a trapezoid. Can it be a quadrilateral? Well, is it a four-sided figure? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, it is. So I would also say that this is a quadrilateral. So this shape here, I would label this. Oh, I think I forgot one up here. My apologies. Parallelogram. I forgot. I went from rhombus to trapezoid. Let's take a look at parallelogram. I forgot to mention this one. Parallelogram. Is it a parallelogram? I think we mentioned that it was a parallelogram. Let's see, what did I do here? Yes, okay. So it was. I did remember parallelogram. The P's there. I'm just losing my mind today. My apologies, guys, fifth graders. So we said that this was a rectangle, this is a parallelogram, and this is a quadrilateral. Now, which one of these three do you think is the best description? Do you think the quadrilateral is the best description? Do you think the parallelogram or the rectangle is the best description? You know, I would say the rectangle is because it fits two definitions. These other ones only fit one. So I would say this one closely represents a rectangle. Okay, how about this next one? Well, this one here, if you look right away, you could already tell that, well, number one, is it a quadrilateral? It does have four sides. Yes, it does. So you're going to notice in today's lesson that if it's a four-sided figure, you better put quadrilateral right now, right away. On all of them, put quadrilateral. Now, this one has one set of parallel sides. And notice that all of this has two sets of parallel sides, two sets of parallel sides, two sets of parallel sides, two sets of parallel. All four of these are out of the door already. We know it's not any of those because it only has one set, which means it's going to be a trapezoid. So we'll put a T for trapezoid. So this one here represents as a quadrilateral because it's got four sides. And it's a trapezoid because it only has one set of parallel sides. Now, which one is the most specific shape? I think trapezoid is because this one, four-sided figures, this one actually gives a definition, okay? Got a couple more shapes down here. Let's take a look at it. Let's move this guy over here. Now, this one here, there's going to be a lot for this one because you're going to notice with a square, does it have 4 equal sides lengths? Yes, it does have 4 equal side lengths. Does it have 4 right angles? Yeah, it has 4 right angles. Does it have 2 sets of parallel sides? Yes, it does. So we're going to call this a square. Okay. Now let's look at a rectangle. Does it have 4 right angles? Yes, it does. 1, 2, 3, 4. Does it have 2 sets of parallel sides? Yes, it does. So I'm going to say that this is also a rectangle. So I'm going to put RE down. Okay. Next one here, rhombus. Does it have 4 equal side lengths? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, it does. Does this have 2 sets of parallel sides? I think so, because here's one set, there's the other set. So I would say this is also an RH. So this would be an example of a rhombus. A parallelogram. Does it have 2 sets of parallel sides? Here's one set. Here's 2 sets. I would say yes, it's a parallelogram. Trapezoid. I don't think it's a trapezoid because trapezoid means it only has 1 set, and this one has 2. But is it a quadrilateral? Is it a 4-sided figure? Yes, it is. So I'm going to put a Q here. So notice this shape right here can actually have 5 different names to it. It could be a quadrilateral, square, a rectangle, a rhombus, or a parallelogram. Now, which one is the most specific one? I'm thinking the square is because in this particular case, it's filling 3 different definitions. So I would say square for this one. Okay. And then our last one over here, well, if we look at the angles, we see that there are no right angles. So that means it's not going to be a square and it's not going to be a rectangle because both of those have right angle definitions in them. How about a rhombus? Well, I don't think all 4 sides are the same length. This guy right here looks a little bit longer than this guy over here, okay? So it's not going to be a rhombus. But how about a parallelogram? Does it have 2 sets of parallel sides? Well, these are parallel over here, and the top 2 are parallel. So, yep, I would say parallelogram. So I'm going to put P for parallelogram. Is it a trapezoid? Nope, because it has 2 sets of parallel sides, not just 1. And is it a quadrilateral? Because it's a 4-sided figure. Yes, it is. So I would label this as a parallelogram and a quadrilateral. Now, which one is the most specific one? The parallelogram is going to be the most specific one. The quadrilateral is really a generic definition. If it can fit any one of these other ones are actually going to be more specific. Okay? All right, so if you take a look at your assignment for today there, 5th graders, I'm going to have you do, your assignment is going to be on the first page on both of the sheets today. So I'm going to have you do page 859. You're going to do numbers 3 through 10. And be careful. Remember what it says. Don't forget to write down as many as possible and then circle the one that it most accurately defines that particular shape. And then you're going to do on page 861, I'm going to have you do numbers 1 through 6. Same idea there. Just write down those. So today's lesson is just identifying quadrilaterals. Using those definitions. Please, I would go back. I would definitely use this here to help you today. I think that's going to be beneficial for you. So if you have any questions, please, 5th graders, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm here to help you the best that I can. If you need to go back and watch the video, please go ahead and do that. I'm here to help you with any questions you might have. So good luck with your lesson today, 5th graders, and we'll see you with the next video.